Everybody, welcome to the Chaotic Grind Show. I am your host, Mike Mahaffey, and tonight we have Al Roberts back and Bob. If you could see him behind the book and the alien, his name's Tub on the screen. Um, Tonight we're gonna go through a little bit more of Al's story and what his discoveries on. We're gonna talk about a little bit more into abductions and we'll talk about, we'll go through his books and his website again so you guys can go check that out. Find his books if you're interested. And let's get the show on the road. So, Al, we got Al Roberts, we got Bob.
Hey, I've been abducted. I'm sitting here.
She's the picture.
She is the project. All right.
Okay.
All right, Al. So you want to get in? You want to talk a little bit more about the abduction side of your research?
Yes. Now, abductions, abductees are from, let me say there's about 18 factors involved associated with these alien abductions. Number one is abductees are from all over the world, and they come from different races, different religions, and from all walks of life. And their financial or social status does not seem to be a factor. Number two, say, with very few exceptions, none of these people know each other. Third factor is early on, there was many abductees were under the impression that their experience was unique, completely unaware that it was happening to other people. And that was before the Barney and Betty Hill thing came along. There was a lot of reports, and the only problem was that researchers didn't take them too seriously in the beginning until after the Barney and Betty Hill story came through. Then now it's very common knowledge to most people doing research on the subject now. Another factor. Researchers eventually began recognizing similarities that were just simply too numerous to be coincidental, especially in seemingly unimportant little details. Like, there was a yellow trash can in a corner. Not that there was a yellow trash can, but I mean little unimportant details that people would be revealing to these researchers through hypnosis. And there were so many similarities in that just unimportant little details that turned out to be a very common factor. Another issue is because most of the early cases had received little or no publicity. Many had not really been publicized. It was highly unlikely that somebody pulling a hoax off in, say, Tupelo, Mississippi, would have any knowledge of what's happened to someone who was reporting identical details, or say what happened, say someone up in Boise, Idaho. They had no way of knowing what other people were going through, and yet they were reporting basically the same thing. So that was a very important issue that researchers were taking into consideration. Most abductees shun notoriety. I mean, they fear ridicule, and they're afraid that any publicity will be detrimental to their job security. So they've got everything to lose and nothing to gain. Then you've got a factor of memory suppression, and that seems to be affect a good majority of abductees. They come back, they wake up, they have no memory of what happened, unless they realize maybe there was some missing time, but a lot of them don't even realize that. So they're mentally programmed not to remember. It's just how they, these creatures, these little gray guys would be the ones that are mostly involved with the abductions. And they have ways of suppressing the memory. So, and then you've got telepathic communication is um, another factor. Now, these little gray guys don't speak. They've got a very thin mouth that never opens when they talk. So obviously they're communicating by some
Oh,
form of telepathy. Even though the people are receiving these messages may not have any telepathic abilities. So then you've got a factor of alien descriptions. They've got the little grays, 3.5, 4 feet tall. They're the majority of the people, the ones involved with abductions. There's also a very human-looking species. They've been dubbed by researchers, they call them the Nordics because most of them have blonde hair and blue eyes and they're very, very tall. But there's other species have been involved, reptilian style creatures and robotic creatures involved. So, but the majority that have been turning up in the research is these little 3.5 feet, 4 foot tall grays. Mind control is something, another factor. These creatures somehow are able to control what these abductees will remember and will not remember. They may even be programming false memories into their mind. With that, we don't know. It's just something that they have a way of how they can control your mind. It's just another one of those factors that have come out in hundreds and hundreds of cases that have been investigated. Another factor, removal of clothing. Now, when these people are abducted, usually they'll see a blinding flash of light or they'll encounter a creature somewhere along. But the next thing they know, they're lying naked on a table in this craft, or else they're sitting on a bench with other people who are abducted, waiting their turn to be examined. That seems to be a very common factor. Now, they don't remember taking off any of their clothes. Now, whether that's something the aliens do with mind control, or maybe the aliens take their clothing off themselves, and who knows? I do know, in many cases that have been investigated, some of the details that came through when they were returned after their abduction. They wake up in the morning, maybe wearing pajamas that are put back on inside out, or a shirt that's put on backwards. In some cases, they come back wearing somebody else's clothes, and this has happened numerous times. Then you've got automobile abductions. They seem to take place when someone's driving down a back road, isolated, maybe a dirt road, or occasionally on a very quiet section of highway where there's hardly any traffic at all. And they may see a flash of light, but then the next thing they know, they wake up. This could be any number of places. Some cases they wake up in a field next to a forest or woods, without no idea how they got there. They could wake up driving the car, finding out that there may be 25, 30, 40 miles down the road from where they were when they saw this flash of light. And find out all of a sudden there's a couple of hours missing. In some cases, they woke up driving down the road, heading in the opposite direction from which they were originally headed. It's really weird. Now you've got what they call imaging and envisioning. Now, this was brought to light by Dr. David Jacobs, who's a retired history professor from Temple University in Philadelphia. And he got interested in abductions when he talked to Bud Hopkins, who started the whole process of investigating these abduction things. And I think I mentioned that before. Now, the imaging experience, he in his research shows that they show scenes on some sort of a projection screen. Now, they may range from beautiful pastoral scenes to just depicting the person's daily routines. But on some occasions, and many occasions, one common disturbing factor is they're shown images that frequently include apocalyptic destruction. And the abductees is told that these things are going to happen. And that's a very important issue that involves another aspect, but we'll get into that some other time. Now, another aspect is multiple abductions. Now, under hypnosis, many abductees have revealed more than one experience. Many describe having been abducted from the age of maybe 5 or 6 years of age, multiple times through their life, usually up until they're in their teens. And then, according to Jacob's research, it kind of stops for a while before it does continue again into their adult life. But there's a period where it just it seems when they're in their teens, it just seems to back off for a while.
Like they don't remember at all.
These implants. Now, the late Dr. Roger Lear was a podiatrist. He got into alien abductions and into the implants. He got into removing implants from abductees. In one case, he had removed 3 implants from 2 people. One person had one in the hand and one in the toe. Another person had another one I don't know, it was either the hand or the foot. And they were all identical. Now they were wrapped up in a cocoon style thing, a keratinous substance that actually come from the person's own body material.
What?
And these cocoons and this material from the person's body.
Like hair or skin or
No, it was just
fluid?
something. No, it's just whatever. Part of the physiological program, wherever they implanted the thing, it just took just material from around there, wrapped this thing itself in a cocoon, and it was impervious to infection of any kind. And some of these things had been in their bodies for years. There was never any infection or any kind of rejection. Lear said if they could develop this technology, it would virtually eliminate organ transplant rejection.
Huh.
So it's an amazing. And he also removed some implants of other people that were transmitting on this very high frequency, one that astronomers use to examine transmissions coming from the stars, radio signals from stars put out. That up in that range And there was another one that it was each transplant or each implant was transmitting on two different frequencies, one up in the astronomical range and one in the UHF range. What they were transmitting and to whom they were transmitting, who knows? They don't know.
Huh.
But the minute they were removed, they stopped transmitting. They went dead. So that was a pretty important piece of information that came out of the abduction thing. Then you've got teleportation. How are these people being brought aboard their ships? In some cases, I mean, they're abducted along the road or the highway, and they're forced to drive off the road into the woods somewhere, and they're forced to somehow they can't uh, fight it off. What's happening to them? They just end up walking right to the ship with these little gray guys. But when they're taken out of their beds at night, out of their bedrooms, or taken out of their cars, or wherever they're taken, how the hell did they take them up to their ship? Well, what seems to be happening is it starts out with a bright light and maybe one of these little gray creatures appearing in their bedroom, one or more of them, and they'll act as escorts. How many people, and this is an extrapolation of information from hundreds of people who have been hypnotized, going through hypnotherapy after being abducted. They report floating through closed windows, through the walls of a building, through the roof of a building. Many described being encompassed in a light as they were rising up into the sky. And they could see all the houses and things below them getting smaller and smaller as they're going higher and higher. And a couple of people reported looking up and seeing this oval-shaped craft that they were heading for to the middle of, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, they're inside of it and undergoing examinations and whatnot. But I think one of the most important issues is the hybrid breeding program. And I think I mentioned some of this on the last time I was on. Um, Hybrid breeding is something that researchers are now beginning to take very seriously. How do we know there's hybrid breeding? Well, miracle births going on today. How do you get a miracle birth going on today? Well, women that are married found themselves pregnant, said, well, they were very, very careful using birth control, or they were having sex with their boyfriends, whatever. They're very, very careful using birth control. Many of them, a good high percentage, said they were not they were not sexually active at the time they became pregnant. Now, they were pregnant. Their gynecologists, numerous gynecologists, have testified they were treating these pregnancies. The women were pregnant. There was a fetus in the womb. But somewhere along before the end of the first trimester, or right around the end of the first trimester, the fetuses just disappeared from their wombs. Now, there was no miscarriage, there was no abortion, or there was no case of pseudocyesis, which is the false pregnancies. These gynecologists testified these women were pregnant, and they can't understand how all of a sudden they became unpregnant. One one gynecologist said when he realized that the fetus was gone, he had only been treating it on this woman for I was just a week before, and all of a sudden it just disappeared. It wasn't absorbed into the body. Uh, he went to clean the womb and found that it already had been cleaned. So, now, what seems to be going on is with these pregnancies, why are they taking these fetuses from the wombs of these women? Uh, Number one, these women are abducted usually, and this is again an extrapolation of information from hundreds of cases where uh, these women are abducted during their fertile period when they are ovulating, and these creatures are extracting their eggs. Now, what are they doing with the eggs? Well, let's look at what they're doing with men. Men are abducted randomly. There's no set time, place or anything. They just periodic, whenever they feel they need a man, they abduct a male. One of the things that they go through with males is uh, anal inspections. uh, but the most important thing seems to be they're extracting sperm from these males. Now, why are they doing that? Now, what seems to be going on is they're taking the sperm they extract from these males and fertilizing the eggs that they're extracting from females in an in vitro process. Once the egg is fertilized, they abduct the woman again, and insert the fertilized fetus through insemination into her womb. But then before the end of the first trimester, or right around the end of the first trimester, they extract that fetus. Now, one woman, under the care of Dr. Jacobs, she managed to ask this alien, "Why are you taking my fetus? Why?" And he told her, "We only take the ones that we need." So what does that tell you? And there's others that they don't need, that they're not taking, which is suggesting that there are two modes of this uh, insemination process that they're using. One, they're using the extracted fetuses for some sort of examination tests, experiments on their ship, something along that line. The ones that they don't take are being born into our society. Now, what's the difference between the two? Now, women then occasionally bring a woman back to their ship and introduce her to either the fetus or maybe one that's been growing for a few years, and apparently it's the same one that they extracted from her womb, and it has a combination appearance of both human and alien features. In many cases, the women, they want to take these children home with them, but they're told that they will not be able to survive an hour, and will affect on their feelings, on their emotions. Now, one thing that Dr. Jacobs brought out in his studies, these aliens have trouble understanding human emotions. Their emotions are very restricted. They're unable to express emotional happiness, joy, it's something that you would find very delightful. They're restricted. Their emotion in that direction is limited. They can only go so far with it, not beyond that point. The same thing with negative feelings. They cannot experience violence or anything of that nature. Their emotions are restricted between these two levels of emotion, and they assume that they're experimenting with these hybrid fetuses that they've taken has something to do with that. Now, the fetuses that go to full term and are born into our society, they suspect have been infused with DNA that's been enhanced in different ways to improve moral, social, technological um, uh, issues in persons' lives. And that's another issue we'll get into in another time. But those are basically the issues that are involved with alien abductions. Now, how do they relate to the biblical connection? And my studies eventually brought me to studying these biblical passages. So you've got what appear to be these aliens, these people, these women getting pregnant, experiencing what you might consider a miracle birth because they were very careful in using contraceptives, or they were never sexually active at the time they became pregnant. So consider that as got to be a miracle birth, you know. But you know, if you don't believe in miracles, then you have to look at what's going on with the abductions and the extreme sperm extraction and the extracting the eggs from the females. Now, in biblical times, we have a lot, several miracle births described in the Bible. Now, the difference with the biblical miracle births is this: what seems to be each one that occurred, and I'll go through the different ones here in a moment. They seem to be experiments of characteristics that were later evident in Jesus Christ. When you look at all his life in the New Testament, everything he did, he's experiencing what seems to be tests of things that were going on in the Old Testament with these miracle births. Now, I would suspect in the beginning it started out with Adam and Eve. I believe they were, I can't prove it, it's a theory, you know, like I mentioned before. I suspected that they were genetically created hybrids. Now, why would they create two hybrids? Well, according to religious teachings now, everything started 6,000 years ago, you know, around 4000 BC. That's when God created the earth, the moon, the stars, the light, everything. But science, you know, has proof that the earth and our solar system was formed around 4.5 billion years ago. And it's gone through a lot of changes since then. Now, we know that the human race has been around for many, many thousands of years. So we have to ask the question, why would this being who has identified himself as the Lord create two individuals when humans, well, and the population of humans already existed on basically all the continents? My theory along this line is they were born with enhanced genetics meant to improve the social, moral, and somewhat technological advancement, evolution of the human race. Why? They ask us, why would they do that? Well, look at these alien abduction, these abductees that these aliens are showing them these apocalyptic scenes of devastation, telling them these things are really going to happen. Wow, is something really going to happen? Maybe they're advancing the evolution of the human race, so we will develop the technology to be able to save ourselves from whatever this devastation is that's coming. But that, again, that's a whole other issue that we'll get into at another time. Like I remember I said, everything is related to everything. and no matter what you talk about, is related to other issues in this whole UFO phenomenon thing, or UAP, what they call it now. So anyway, um, from Adam and Eve, while he broke the only rule he was mentioned supposed to obey, he ate an apple. He ate from the tree of life. Well, supposedly it was a tree. Now he wasn't the one that was tempted, but it was a test. The way I see it, he was put to a test to see if he would obey the rule. Now, if they're trying to improve the human race, obedience of the rules is a very necessary thing. Not bad rules, good rules. The basic Ten Commandments. These are morally acceptable things that the Christianity and Judaism were founded on, these basic principles. But if they can't adhere to these principles, like Adam apparently could not, well, he was no longer valuable to them. So what happened? They kicked him out of the Garden of Eden. Why did they kick him out of the Garden of Eden? Well, because that was the source of their longevity. And that's another factor and I'll get into that if we have time. But they were, the whole thing, if Adam had passed his test, he might have lived for 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years. Now, there's people who created the Garden of Eden, the Lord God, and then you've got the other being called the Lord. You got two individuals. The Bible says, God that let us make man in our image, in our likeness, not let me make man in my image and my likeness. Obviously, he was talking to someone else, or at least that's the way the Bible has it spelled out. Did they make a mistake in explaining it that way? I don't know. I don't think so. But the whole Bible, to me, seems to be a blueprint of everything they have been doing for that whole biblical period of 4,000 years. And it's still going on today. And it's just an agenda to advance the human race on a socially, moral, and technological level. And there's a reason, there could be a number of reasons for that, but that's something we'll get into. Anyway, it's
So you think their Bible was like their diary?
yeah, it's either it was laid out for us to understand what they have been doing, but it's been misunderstood by people absorbed in religion, miraculous and mystical interpretations. I mean, they had no technology back then to understand what was going on. And if the angels appeared in a flash of light, and how many times you read that in the Bible? Teleportation. Well, the only kind of light that they knew back then was created by fire. So they couldn't explain a flash of light or a flashlight or any kind of light, except they considered it as a form of fire. So, but anyway, getting on with the hybrid in the Bible, Isaac was the next hybrid they created. And now the program of this new race was, the progenitors of this new race was Isaac. Now, Abraham's sterile wife, Sarah, became pregnant with him at age 90, in which she believed to be a miracle. Now, we might speculate that, like the hybrids, children being born into our society today, she became inseminated during an abduction with all memory of the event erased from her conscious mind, which happens to abductees today. Now, Abraham was only like 75 years old when this being called the Lord visited him and told him that Sarah was going to have a child. But it was 24 years later before it happened. So how did he know 24 years in advance that Sarah was going to be pregnant at age 90? And how could a 90-year-old woman, who supposedly was sterile, end up getting pregnant? Unless it had to be by some form of insemination. I mean, she'd been married for how many years, never got pregnant, was from her husband, unless he was sterile. But that doesn't seem to be the case. So anyway, Isaac, I think, was being tested with one of the qualities that were later very evident in Christ, and his test was being able to accept his own death as an acceptable process to contribute to a noble cause. Now, for no reason at all, the Lord tells Abraham that he's got to sacrifice Isaac. Isaac was still a young child. Why would he want to kill his son? It doesn't make sense. But he follows the Lord's instructions, takes him up to the designated place to go, constructs up on this mountain, constructs an altar. Then he ties up Isaac, and Isaac didn't know he knew he was going up there, but he didn't know what for until he got tied up by his father. And then he was going to be the sacrifice, it wasn't going to be a lamb or a goat. He was going to be the sacrifice. But before Isaac actually killed him, this is an angel that spoke to him. Isaac, Abraham, don't hurt Isaac. Blah blah blah. It's he stopped him from killing him. In other words, so. But he told Abraham, and long before that Isaac was going to be the progenitor of a new race, and he was going to have many children. Which makes no sense that he would tell Isaac to go and kill him. How could Isaac have children, generations? If he was dead, it makes no sense. So see, that's another one of the factors that people don't realize. They forget that they read all these things and they say, "Oh God, why would he not kill his son?" Or he was told to kill his son, but then before that, he was told his son's going to have plenty of grandchildren, how's he going to have grandchildren if he's dead? It makes no sense. Anyway, so Isaac, he goes from Isaac to Samson. Now, we don't know what Isaac's went through his mind when he was told that he was going to be the sacrifice. Whether he accepted that or not, we don't know. It doesn't go into that detail. So there's a possibility he may not have been too happy with the idea. I wouldn't be, and somebody's about to kill me. But anyway, you got the next one come along with Samson. Okay. Now each one of these people were visited by the Lord or a prophet, somebody connected to the Lord, or an angel. All had a connection to the Lord. Were visited ahead of time and told that they're going to have these children and these babies. Okay. So an angel visited Samson's mother one day. She was out in the fields and told him that she was going to have a child. And she probably doubted his word, but the second time she was out in the field, the angel came back and told her that now she was going to have this child. So she runs and gets her husband told him. His name was Manoah. He comes out. He prepares a burnt sacrifice for this visitor, this angel. And but before anybody has to eat it, the angel rises into heaven and in the fire, in the flames of supposedly in the flames of the sacrifice. Now again, that makes no sense. How can a being rise into the sky, wrapped up in fire from a sacrifice. Now, remember what I said about light? What the interpretation of light would be to these people that had no technology. They would associate any bright light, and the only light they knew of was created by fire. So any kind of artificial light, they would probably, in all likelihood, associate with fire. And this became misunderstood through all the years and that these stories have been passed down. But Samson, or he, he did end up sacrificing his life in the end. Um, he he became Delilah was the gal he got hooked up with, and he became infatuated with her supposedly, and he had killed many Philistines, and supposedly the story of him killing 1,000 Philistines with the jawbone of an ass. Well, the Philistines didn't like him at all. They did I lose you here?
No, you're on there. You're good.
Oh, okay. Okay. Um, it looks like I lost you here for a second.
No,
I
no, no.
lost it.
You're here. I'll let you know.
Okay.
If you hear me
All
yelling
right.
for you, Al, come
Okay.
back.
All right. There we go. Yeah, I lost the video on it. All right, Samson, he became enamored with Delilah, and he had remarkable strength according to the Bible. He was how could he kill 1,000 Philistines with the jawbone of an ass and not be injured himself? I mean, come on. Well, anyway, they wanted to get rid of him, and they knew his infatuation with Delilah was the answer. I think they put her up to it. And she set him up for the Philistines by she got him drunk one night. No, he was she wanted to know what the secret of his strength was, so to give to the Philistine. Well, everybody assumes the secret of his strength was his hair. That's what he said. But that makes absolutely no sense from a logical point of view. So every time she asked him about it, he made up a different story. And I think he knew she was using him to set him up. Now, his mission, the angel told his mother before he was born that he was going to, kind of get rid of the Philistines, save all his people from the domination of the Philistines. So I think this was part of the plan. So she finally convinced him to reveal what that the secret of his strength was in his hair. So she goes and tells the Philistines, and they set it up. She gets him drunk one night, passes out. She cuts off his hair. So now, supposing without all his long hair, he became powerless. Didn't have the strength, and everybody believed this. So he's drunk. He passes out. He wakes up. The Philistines have him in shackles. And to be doubly sure they wasn't going to do anything, they they gouged out his eyes.
What? Wow.
I can't believe that. I don't. Maybe they did. Maybe they did. We don't know. That could be in addition to the story that somebody made up over the centuries of stories passed down. So anyway, they put him in prison. They gouged out his eyes, but they were going to have a feast to their god Dagon. They were going to have the celebration, and they knew this was coming up, and they were going to have a big celebration. Everybody was going to be there, this was his chance that he was waiting for. He was going to get the Philistines, but he had to get them all at the same time. Not a few here, a few there. He had to get them all at once. What better opportunity would he have to do this than when they're all gathered in the same spot in this temple? So what he does, they bring him into the temple and making fun of him, ridiculing him, and spitting on him, and now the story goes, he gets between the two pillars and he pushes the pillars apart. It collapses the roof of the temple down on everybody, killing everybody that was in the building, including himself. Now, is that a believable theory? Yeah, possibly. So anyway, he had to do it this way. My opinion is he had to let them do whatever they wanted to him. God's out of his eyes. I don't know if they really did that or not, if that was just a story that they made up. But he had to get them all at one time in order to get them, period. Because once he could have broken free and escaped, but then they never would have believed any other story he might concoct about what made him so strong. So this was his plan to get them all at one time. He probably knew that there would be he would probably be killing himself. He probably would not survive this thing, but he never lost his strength. So he pushed the pillars apart. Down comes the roof, collapses around the temple. Kills everybody, including himself. So to me, that was backup test of Isaac's test, because we don't know if Isaac was willing to give up his life or not when the Lord instructed Abraham to kill him. So that's a question we don't know the answer to. But Samson willingly sacrificed his life to do this. So we think that was the test that they repeated. Samson, which in the long run, when you look what they did to Christ, he had to be willing to accept his fate. And he knew this was going to happen. He planned this out long before it ever happened. So he knew what was going on. Now, so that's the case with Samson. Now the next case you got is a Shunammite boy. Now nobody ever heard about the Shunammite boy, but the story's in the Bible. It's let's see, the scriptures say little about him, only that his mother was old and sterile. And if you look in the Bible, 2 Kings, chapter 4, verses 8 through 37, describes the same protocol of a pregnancy visitation announcement by somebody representing the Lord, predicting the birth of a child. Now, she supposedly was old and sterile and considered her pregnancy a miracle. So there's another miracle birth. The only thing is, now he was brought back to life. The child was born. He supposedly died while laying in his mother's lap. What happened? He started to have problems with pains in his head. My impression was that he was being tested for telepathic abilities, but it never quite developed with him. In fact, he was getting pains in his head, terrible pains, and it was driving him crazy. He was like maybe 4 or 5 years old, and his mother was giving him comfort on her lap, and then all of a sudden she realized he's not breathing. He's not breathing. His skin's getting cold. He's turning blue. Oh my God! She thinks he's dead. Now, Elisha was the prophet that was staying in the house. She provided him with a room to stay in whenever he visited the region. So she takes the child, runs to the room where Elijah's room, puts him on Elisha's bed, runs out to the fields to find Elisha, And he sees her coming and she realizes that she's in great distress. What's wrong? What's wrong? And she explains that the child is dead. What does he do? He takes his staff and he hands it to his servant. He says, "Take my staff, lay it upon the boy's face." Wow. He staff, his servant takes the staff, runs down the head. Now, Elisha was old and could walk too fast. And the woman, Shunammite woman, stayed with Elijah because he was elderly, he couldn't walk too fast. And he he runs to the house, puts the staff on the child's face, runs back up, nothing happened. He runs back up the road to meet Elisha and the child's mother. He says, lay the staff upon the child's face, but nothing happened. Okay, now they're almost to the house. Elisha takes the staff, runs into the house. Oh, he couldn't walk too fast. He goes in the house, goes to his bedroom, closes the door. Now he's behind the closed doors. And the story goes, he climbs up on the bed and lays on top of the boy. Now, apparently he did this for a while, hoping the child would come around. Now, apparently, the child's body began to warm up. Oh, this is working now. Okay. So he gets off the bed. He's pacing the floor, waiting for the child to come around. Quite a while passes, and the child still hasn't come around. But so he climbs up on the bed again, gets on top of the boy, and it wasn't too long after that, the child sneezes. It says he sneezed 7 times. Well, the numbers 7 and 20 in the Bible are ambiguous numbers. They could mean anything, any number. But so the child comes around. So to me, this is telling me the child was not dead. I think the child was so absorbed trying to get the pain out of his head, he put himself into suspended animation. Now, there was back in 70, I forgot what year it was. I happened to be watching a documentary on, it was a 7.5 earthquake that hit Kobe, Japan. I think it was in 1975, if I'm not mistaken. I don't have the notes in front of me there. Like 2 weeks after the impact of this earthquake, the rescuers dug a whole bunch of children out of a collapsed hospital that supposedly were thought were dead, but they were still alive. And one doctor examined them. Said they survived in a state of suspended animation. So is it possible that when an infant, a child, they were babies really, become traumatized, that they can actually fall into a state of suspended animation? Well, if this story is true, that from this documentary I saw, yeah, it's very possible. So going back to this Shunammite boy, was he really dead or was he in a state of suspended animation? The trauma of his terrible headaches, I guess they must have been worse than migraines. And he just put himself into a state of suspended animation. And that's my theory. I can't prove it, but it's a theory. So that, and why was he put into a state of, well, why did he have the headaches in the first place? My idea is that they were trying to enhance telepathic abilities. Christ had telepathic abilities. In fact, on the time he brought he raised people from the dead, and at that one time he spoke to the Lord, supposedly, through I guess it was, had to be, uh, uh, telepathically because the Lord wasn't there. I mean, he was talking to him from down here, up there. So he must have had some kind of a telepathic ability to talk to the Lord. And it was a frequent appearance, frequent things he did during, and when you read through the Bible, there's a whole bunch of stories. So that was my idea there. Now you got um, Solomon was what I believe was the next tyrant. Now, he was not born to an old and sterile woman. He was born to Bathsheba. Now, she was a married woman, and her husband was named Uriah, and he was out in battle in a war, for Solomon's war. They were fighting wherever they were fighting at. And David, who was king of Jerusalem, was very infatuated with her beauty. So while Uriah was out fighting the battles, he got Bathsheba or Bathsheba into an adulterous affair. Now, as how was that going to turn out? Well, she apparently was willing, but eventually she got pregnant. Now there was a big problem. This wasn't going to look good for David. And Bathsheba, oh, she was confirmed an adulteress. They could have stoned her to death. Well, David, we got to solve this problem. So what does he do? He sends word to the captain of his army, send Uriah to me, Bathsheba's husband. He arrives at the temple or at the temple, and Solomon, or David has a long talk with him. They talk a lot about the war. Then he tells him, "Well, all right, you go on home to your wife," and assuming he's going to sleep with her, and that's going to explain her pregnancy. Well, Uriah, that's kind of weird, according to the biblical narrative. He doesn't go home to his wife. He feels guilty about leaving his comrades in battle. He decides to sleep on a mat in the temple with the servants. Oh, David realizes, hey, this ain't going to work. We got to think of something else here. So he creates a letter to sealed letter he gives to Uriah to bring back to the captain of his army. And the letter, he's telling the captain of his army to put Uriah up in the front lines where the fighting is heaviest. And he's sure to be killed, which is exactly what happened. Now, once Uriah is dead, well, Bathsheba's free to marry somebody else, and David's free to marry Bathsheba. Well, this seems weird because this being called the Lord, who is so righteous, appears to have tolerated or condoned this adulterous relationship between David and Bathsheba. Why? Now, my impression, from a logical perspective, the next test that they wanted to incorporate into Christ was wisdom. Now, Solomon was born to Bathsheba, and what better candidate would they have to test wisdom, enhanced wisdom in a hybrid child, and have him grow up and be successor to the king of Jerusalem, which was David. And we all know from the biblical narrative, Solomon exhibited an enormous wisdom. He demonstrated that through his whole time as a kingdom. Now, again, the Lord did nothing to him when he broke the rules later on in his kingdom, and while he was king, took wives from other nations, worshipped their gods, and he was never punished by the Lord. So that tells me Solomon was an important part of the Lord's agenda of enhancing, in this sense, of creating the characteristics that were necessary for Christ. Because after Adam blew the thing in the Garden of Eden, they couldn't go along with the original plan. So they had my idea, the way according to the biblical narrative for over the 4,000 years, is they needed somebody to actually be born into humanity that would change the perception, the moral and social standards of the human race. And we know Christ was very good at promoting righteous ways to live, the Ten Commandments, basically. So you've got that situation that kind of parallels the miracle births that that are occurring today. But now Samson was not a miracle birth because she was
Having an affair.
she gave birth to Solomon, but it wasn't that it was a miracle birth because he supposedly became pregnant with David, but was it David that got him pregnant, or was this part of the Lord's plan to put Solomon in charge of being the next king of Jerusalem, where he could demonstrate this wisdom, and which would have an effect on the people there? Other little ways, subtle ways that they were trying to improve humanity. So these are the facts that really make you wonder. Now, the next one, supposed miracle birth, is John the Baptist. Now, he was born to Elizabeth, the mother of John the Baptist's mother, and allegedly she was an old and sterile woman. She was also the cousin of Christ's mother, Mary, and she was married to the priest named Zechariah. Now, one night, when Zechariah was doing his duties in the temple, an angel appeared to him, standing next to the altar, and told him that his wife Elizabeth was going to have a son, and he was to be named John. Well, Zechariah questioned the angel word, supposedly his wife was old and sterile, and I'm not really sure about that. I'll explain that in a minute. So because he doubted the angel and questioned the angel's words, he said, well, he's questioning God's words because it was God's idea to do this. So he struck mute as a punishment for his complaining. Now, his voice doesn't return until after the child is born. And then his voice suddenly returns. Now, my question was was Elizabeth really an old and sterile woman?
Mm.
Now, Christ was born to what they claim to be a virgin. Well, if you go back a couple thousand years to Isaac's time, the word virgin simply meant young woman. Had nothing to do with purity or no sexual connotation. Whether it held the same 2,000 years later, I don't know. But the thing is, many scholars believe that Mary became pregnant with Christ or was inseminated with Christ when she was a teenager. And they estimate she could have been as young as 14 years old. Now, what we know about biblical history, men, grown up men, they could have been 20, 30, 40 years old, were promised a bride, somebody that just had to give birth to a daughter, and she was promised to this person, this grown up person, as a bride when she became older. And these young girls, in many cases, got married as young as 14 and 15 years old to these older men. So, and if Elizabeth was a cousin to Mary, and Mary was as young as 14, how old could Elizabeth have been? Could she have been 65, 70 years old? Yeah. I just don't see it. Uh, uh, I think she's very possibly uh, she was a young woman too. But the fact that it was a miracle birth, another miracle birth, this goes on, not as being another miracle birth. So, what do you say? Yeah, who knows? I don't know. But the connection between the hybrids being born today and the miracle births of biblical time, I mean, these kids being born today, the women that were pregnant and they got pregnant, even though their fetuses disappeared, they were miracle births because they weren't, they were too careful using contraceptives, or else they were not even sexually active at the time they got pregnant. So it has to be a miracle birth. That, or I want to look at it from a logical perspective, insemination. So, and you have any questions on this?
No, this is wild. Al, you really took your research and you went deep.
Oh, there's so many things involved with that.
how did you how did you start to tie this in with the Bible?
Well,
Like,
when
was it?
I started my research, took me a long time. It took several years. I was my first book was a result of like 23 years of research. I thought it would only take a couple of months at the most, because I wanted to figure out what it was I saw when I was 15 years old. But when I got into this research, I got into all these different aspects. And what I was doing, I was reading all these different books, and a lot of them was crap. I mean, just the fringe element, you know, they were making up stories, but a lot of them made sense. And the ones that there were so many um, credible investigators and researchers, and it took me a while to recognize who the credible ones were, and which ones I should stay away from. And all the information that these guys wrote, they were each investigator, each researcher in the field was investigating a particular. Most of them were reporting on a particular incident, a particular sighting, like the Roswell event or something along that. And there were so many things going on that other people were writing about, and I look at what they were writing about, each one of them, they had pieces of information that tied in with the information that somebody else was writing about. And that was going on down the line. There was probably about 15, 20, 25 different connections that were being put together here. And this involved, I mean, all aspects of the phenomenon. And that's when I started to recognize, you know, and there were a lot of biblical references, and it took me a couple of years before I actually decided to check out the Bible. And the minute I got in and check out the Bible, the first thing um, that struck me was, I forgot it was, I opened the book, the middle pages somewhere, and it was something, I forgot now what it was that struck me. So I went to the back into Genesis, and then I'm reading, uh, and God said, "Let us make man in our image and our likeness, not in my image and my likeness." Well, that's, I said, "Oh, this can't be, how can?" Uh, but then they make up the story of the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. The Father was, the Father was God, the Son was Jesus, and the Holy Ghost was something in between there. Supposedly it's all the same person, but and this just it didn't make sense to me. I'm I'm a logical person by nature, and I'm trying to see the logic in this, and I couldn't see any logic. I was trying to put it together in a logical perspective, and then that's how I came up with the theory, how these things put together. And I mean, it covers so damn many things. Like, uh, well, I mentioned before the longevity factor. Now that I could probably talk for 2 hours on that. And that was something that I think they intended humanity to have back in the Garden of Eden. But that was a mistake because when Adam screwed up and they had to kick him out of the Garden of Eden, he lost the true, no more access to the tree of life, which was the source of his longevity. Now, the genes in there for I don't know how many years he lived in the garden and ate this supposedly this fruit from the tree of life. Now, if there was a tree, it could have been anything. Uh, because of the apple story, he ate an apple, and that was breaking the law. That was breaking the law. Everybody assumes that it was an apple tree. I think in one version, I was looking up at something in the Hebrew Bible one time, and I think it referred to it maybe as like a banana tree. But who knows? Even if it was a tree, it could have been anything. It could be just a representative representing whatever it was that really was the source of their longevity. But if he, for many years, he was him and Eve, and she, I think, she was born not with the enhanced genes that he had, the DNA that gave him a better insight into what was going on, but she apparently went along with being uh, eating the forbidden fruit. She was the one that was tested, not Adam, but he was the one that was ordered not to eat. Well, they were both actually ordered, but he said, "If you eat of this tree, you will die." And of course, when they ate the fruit, they didn't die. At least then, Adam lived for 830 years, and then she lived a long life. But the thing was, the the elements of whatever it was in the tree of life or whatever that really was that enhanced their longevity, uh, that they absorbed enough of it to keep them alive for almost 1,000 years. Um, and they passed it. This was an element in their children that they passed on. But and as I mentioned before, in 830 years, Adam is only reported as having 3 children in the beginning. And he went on, it doesn't, it mentions that later on he had more and more children after that. But he had, uh, oh, the first one was Cain was born first. Doesn't say how many years after he had been expelled from the Garden of Eden that Cain was born. But that could have been any time. Then Abel was born. Doesn't say how many years after Cain was born that Abel was born. But the fact is, longevity or the factor of fertilization seemed to, and Adam's descendants seemed to, the women seemed to have not have many children, and for like maybe 1,000 years apart. Um, so, or could maybe 20 years. Could fertile period could have been maybe as many as 20 years. I mean, if she had if he had a fertile period of a monthly cycle, 28 days, like it is for women today. I mean, surely Adam was not losing sperm. He's still making sperm. I mean, she could have had 100 children in her lifetime, which probably would have had a bad effect on her life cycle. But that's why I think that her fertility period was based on her longevity, which could have been every 10 to 20 years. So, Cain, you know, Abel could have been born maybe 20 years after Cain. Who knows? But then Seth, the third child, was born when Adam was, oh, I forgot what. Adam was 100. Damn it. I forgot how many years it was before. Okay. But I mean,
Right.
in his lifetime, he only produced 3 children. So it had to be Eve's fertility cycle that spread this out so much. And then their children, um, the same thing. When Adam's sons married other women, who usually was within the family, there was other children produced by other females produced by Adam's descendants, and when they married into the family, again, you've got 20, 30 years separation between the births of these children. But the later children of Adam and Eve, after Adam's departure from the Garden of Eden, the later children, it says these men produced children at age 65, didn't produce children until they were at age 65. And that was because Adam's children was the DNA still on longevity or whatever it was. They did not. There's no longevity. What I'm trying to say is they probably did not mature until they were around 60, 65.
Oh wow.
So they couldn't have children. It's just like a 10-year-old you can't have a child anyway. So they were producing children at 65, and the fact that they produced a lot of children around that age, they were marrying women from the local population, not descended from Eve, who had normal fertility cycles. So they were producing children in a much earlier, and they produced a lot of children. But eventually, the age factor wore down, and that kind of sort of ended around the time of Noah's flood. But I think Methuselah was the last one that supposedly lived for 965 years. But so it had different effects on different people. I mean, some lived longer than others, but they were up there, living up there for hundreds and hundreds of years. And had to be that factor that the tree of life that Adam passed on to his descendants. Now, when you get into the after the flood, supposedly killed off a lot of people, Noah still had some of this longevity factor. He, I forgot how many years he lived. He outlived his great great grandson Rue by 12 years. So the age and his descendants, Noah's descendants, they were gradually losing. It was becoming shorter and shorter and shorter all the time. So their children gradually, this longevity factor just faded out of existence. Now, but still, there was a problem when you get into further into the Bible. Uh, there's other factors in there that and I should go into it. That would take a hell of a lot more time. And, I should probably change the subject and go to something else here.
Here we got some. We
Sorry.
we got a bunch of questions from one person in the chat, in our little
Okay.
chat room. It says, "Would are the aliens responsible for teaching us, or did they build the pyramids, and for what purpose?" That's probably a whole nother topic there, huh?
Well, there's no real proof on who built the pyramids. A lot of people attribute it to aliens. I think prior to the pyramids being built, the fourth, he's referring to the fourth dynasty pyramids, the Giza pyramids on the Giza plateau, not the other pyramids, the third.
There's no specific. She's just asking, are the aliens responsible for teaching us, or did they build the pyramids, and for what purpose? So, did they teach us how to build them, and then we build them, or
Well,
did
I
or
think
did
there
they
were,
build the pyramids themselves?
there's no proof that they were built by aliens. I think they were probably built by what was the remnants of what, an earlier race that had the technology to do these things that we can't do today. I can't see why aliens would come down and build stone buildings with if they could travel across the galaxy and break the speed of light. I mean, they've got a technology. They can probably build buildings with material that would never. Why would they build them on stone? I think there was a very advanced race that did build a lot of things that deteriorated, except for what they built in stone. And they had the technology to do this. And there were so many cataclysmic destruction that went on over time. I think I forgot how many actual extinctions that they've noted that went on over the millennia. Some of these races, I think, had advanced knowledge, or they knew things that could do things that we can't do, like the the Baalbek stones there. Uh, the Temple of Jupiter in Baalbek, Lebanon. Some of the stones, no, I think they're probably, yeah, and they're like a bigger picture of them in the and the other one of the other files there. These stones are so huge, weighing in excess of 1,000 tons. How the heck can anybody move anything that big?
Yeah.
No, they say alien had to be aliens. Well, not necessarily. If there was an advanced race that knew how to have this technology, they could have done it. But actually, the Temple of Jupiter was built on this huge slab that was already in place. And then they said Yeah, that's good. You see a person sitting on top there. Uh,
You could, yeah, just
yeah,
turn your camera on. It should pop up.
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, look at this one stone slab. Can you tell me how anybody could move something like that? It
It's
just shows this guy sitting on it. It looks like an ant. But
oh yeah,
the size of an ant. Yeah.
there he is. There's Tub. Oh yeah,
And it had, you see it way in the background, the Temple of Jupiter is about 2 miles away. How did they move these from this quarry all the way over to that complex? And they were already carved in the shape that they were installed in the wall. And they didn't carve them out and like
they
like
made
hot
them.
dogs they could roll over there and then of course smooth them out. No, they were carved out uh, just like that from the quarry. And how did they move them? It's you got, maybe it was aliens. I don't know. I can't prove it, but I have there's so much evidence of an ancient civilization that existed, or maybe more than one. Although there is plenty of evidence that aliens were around for several thousand years at least.
Hmm.
Um,
Here's
uh,
another one. Here's another one for you.
all right.
Would also like to know if dolphins possibly have anything to do with aliens. Something about that reaches out to me.
Well, yeah, some movies have kind of portrayed
The
a
dolphins.
connection. They are very intelligent creatures. Um, I
Yeah,
don't.
there's a lot of studies out with dolphins. I don't know really
The only
the
the
the the
only alien creature that pretty sure is in the ocean is the octopus.
that thing. Yeah, that thing. Squids,
Yeah.
jellyfish. Jellyfish is what I don't like, and
Yeah.
they freak me out.
Yeah.
But
Dolphins are pretty. I went to SeaWorld down here one time. They were back in the 70s. And
free Willy.
yeah. Well, I went up the top of this one aquarium park there where the dolphins were swimming around. People were playing with them, throwing. They had these rubber donuts that they were throwing, and the dolphins would catch them on their nose and then throw them back to the people. Well, I was trying to get the attention of one dolphin to throw the damn donut to me, and uh, and I looked away at one time. I had my girlfriend with me. I turned around to talk to her, and that's when I guess this dolphin decided to throw me a donut. When I turned back to look, it hit me square right between the eyes.
It was,
It's center. I mean, it's how accurate they did. I wasn't expecting. You got me when I wasn't expecting it. So, but it shows you they're amazing.
yeah,
Uh,
they are. I think they're doing a lot of research on how they communicate because there's some sort of
yeah.
yeah.
And
I mean, like the birthing of
I had a friend of mine that took his family down there, place in one, not this one SeaWorld, some other place where they could swim in I guess a huge pool, or maybe it was part of the ocean where the dolphins are. Anyway, he said you got to watch out because they like to make love.
yeah, yeah.
He says if you're there, you're you're next in line.
You're
You
gonna
got to
have
be careful
a
with
good
them.
mate.
But
That's pretty
oh
funny.
God. Oh, geez.
Uh,
Yeah.
last question is why is Bob still wearing glasses at night?
Yeah.
Oh.
Where are my
Where's your
glasses?
sunglasses there, Bob?
Glasses on.
Better explain yourself, Bob.
I know something's wrong with my eyes. They burn.
They're just burning.
Gave me eye drops that burn my eyes. I gotta go see someone else.
Uh,
Um. Oh boy. Let's. Uh. So were you before you started tapping into like putting this all together with the Bible? Were you religious before? Did you study the Bible beforehand?
No, not really. I mean, I grew up in a Catholic religion, but I was never, I, I something just didn't hit me as kosher, if you want to call it. I'm not Jewish either, but something, I don't know. I was kind of turned off by a lot. Uh, I don't know. Even as a kid, um, I went to school. The nuns. I went to Catholic school, a couple Catholic schools, and a nun taught us all these things. And uh, especially about the devil oh, and uh, especially about like the birth of Christ. I mean, I did. That's just something I could not quite understand. How could a virgin give birth? Number one, things like that. I just question a lot of these things that it just didn't make sense to me. But the nuns were teaching this as a fact of life, and uh, I, you know, I just I kept looking at even when I was a kid, I kept looking at it in a logical perspective, and I just didn't buy miracles. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong. I'm admitting that I could be totally wrong in my ideas and my thinking, but I just can't help being looking at it things in a logical perspective. That and like well, for instance, when Adam broke his rule, he got kicked out of it. It was 2,000 years went before they started picking up again with interacting with people and creating the hybrids, all that sort of thing. It was like 2,000 years before between that and Adam and Isaac when he was born. So they already know when they started creating these hybrids. I think they were creating them with enhanced genetics, DNA, enhanced DNA, testing the attributes, the characteristics that they wanted to include in Christ, because they knew they figure if their agenda was going to work out, now they needed somebody that could be here and actually affect the people. And Christ was pretty good at that. He taught uh, the moral and ethical standards, the way people should live. And he was trying to carry forth the stories of Moses in a way. Moses come up with the Ten Commandments, and that was another uh, way of trying to enhance the people, control the people's moral and ethical behavior. But this 2,000 years that they had to make up for, and my impression was they didn't do that until right around the turn of the 20th century. That's when our technological uh, advancement just seemed to advance exponentially. I got some notes on that here. Let me give you some quick notes. 20th century geniuses, right around at turn of the century. Thomas Edison, born 1847, 1931. Nikola Tesla, born 1856 and 1943. Henry Ford, born 1863 to 1947. Alexander Graham Bell, born 1847, 1922. Wilbur Norval Wright, born 1867 to 1955 and 1871 to 1948, respectively. And there was also Albert Einstein, 1879 to 1955, one of the greatest scientific minds of the 20th century. Plus the man who fathered our space program, Werner von Braun. Now, he wasn't born in 1912, but he died in 1977. But he took all these inventions of this prior by these guys before him. He fathered our freaking space program. Now, my point here, if Edison, Ford, Bell, the Wright brothers had not been successful in their endeavors, is it a coincidence that other men involved with the same inventions at the same time are ready to step in and take their place? And I'll give you their names: Alessandro Volta, Humphrey Davy, Warren de la Rue, and a few other scientists were in the process of developing an electric light long before Edison received his patent in 1879. Now, before Henry Ford established the Ford Motor Company in 1903, Carl Friedrich Benz, B-E-N-Z, had already invented the first gasoline engine automobile in 1885, while other men were experimenting with steam and electric-powered vehicles at the very same time. Now, although Alexander Graham Bell is credited with the invention of the telephone, Antonio Musi, Philip Reese, and Elisha Gray have also been recognized as contributing to its development. Now you've got, besides the Wright brothers, Sir George Cayley and Carl Jatho, J-A-T-H-O, were also involved with the development of the airplane. Now, the fact that this occurred in the first half of the 20th century suggests there was emphasis placed on humanity to develop these technologies at that time in history. Had the development of these inventions not taken place when they did, we may not yet have put a man in space, let alone on the moon. So it just seems like, the first guys I mentioned, Bell and Ford and all of that, they won the race in getting this thing done before everybody else, supposedly, but some of them they weren't even mentioned that were right up there with them. So
Yeah.
now you got child geniuses. Now I mentioned this before, and the first time we done. Perhaps we should wonder about these child geniuses born in the last few decades, like a young boy in Singapore who spoke his first words when he was just 2 months old, and he gave a science lecture on acids and alkaloids at age 6. Come on. In 2002, Sho Yano graduated summa cum laude from Loyola University in Chicago at age 12, and 6 years later received his PhD in molecular genetics and cell biology. Now, Adam Kirby was already reading books at 10 months of age, and he became the youngest member of British Mensa at age 2, scoring 141 on an IQ test. Now, Philip Pulley of Denver Colorado. He was talking at age 6 months of age, reading books at 18 months of age, and he was studying astronomy at age 3. At age 4, he spotted a mistake an artist made in the mural he painted in the Denver Museum of Natural History that went unnoticed for 30 years. Philip recognized the helmets worn by Spanish conquistadors in the painting were really French helmets worn from the medieval period.
Oh man.
And he also noticed several vertebrae were missing from the tail of a dinosaur skeleton. Now, the, the museum's curator was a woman, and she came out and she said the skeleton was too large to fit in the room, and they had to remove some vertebrae to make it fit. And she said, Philip is the only one who ever noticed it. Come on.
Like you're,
At that age. And then, yeah, then there's others.
did they give them a vertebrae that they weren't using?
Yeah, uh, Elise Tan Roberts, his gal, of North London, accepted into Mensa at 2 years of age, 2 years and 4 months of age, with an IQ of 156. Gregory Smith, twice nominated for the Nobel Prize before he was 16 years old, with an IQ of 200 plus. Then there was Terence Tao, a mathematical genius at age 8 with an IQ of 211. And there were numerous others. Now, I'm not saying there were hyper geniuses born into our society, but it kind of makes you wonder. I mean, I guess there were always geniuses born along the way, but some of them, it's just amazing. So you've got to take into consideration the possibility, not that it's proof, you know, there's a lot of evidence suggesting it, but like I said before, evidence does not necessarily constitute proof. Proof is one thing, evidence not necessarily is proof. What, you gotta go?
No, 2 hours in already.
Oh, gosh, we're in 2 hours. I guess you must be ready to close the shades there.
We are.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're almost at 2 hours. No, it's all right. Yeah, we can call it. So here, yeah, well, here's what I'll do. I'll take it to the website, and we'll just hang on there, Al. This is Al's website. This is where you can go and read more about Al and his books. That's
Email address
arroberts.net.
Mhm.
And then go to the books. There's his books.
They should have my email address on there too if they want to. I think there is.
Yeah, well, let me check it out here. The screen's kind of far away.
Al, are you writing another book?
I want to. If I just find the time.
What's
Yeah,
it
you
gonna
have
be?
a contact page, Al. So they could contact you through here if they wanted to.
Yeah.
And head over to Amazon. I will get the links out there. They were on the first one. If you haven't listened to the first episode with Al, go check that one out.
All right.
And
My first book, I didn't put my first book on the website because it's a different copy.
Yeah,
Most important parts of that book are mentioned in the current book here. The updated, revised version of the first book. And if you buy the first book, there's a lot of information about me in the beginning and stuff. But there were some mistakes in there that we didn't realize at the time. We thought was credible information that turned out to be not necessarily completely credible, but they were at the time that
what you
the
had.
book was written, they were more or less accepted as that. But Right.
Well, that's all right. You so yeah, go check out From Atom to Omega, and that is the revised book. That's what he's talking about right now.
Updated and revised version
Yeah,
of
that's
the
where he
first book.
got rid of the stuff
But
that
there's a lot,
you
there's
found
a lot of
false.
information in the first book that's not in this one because
It was revised. You got
not that it's all bad. I mean, it's not a lot of it's sort of.
no, you're good. All right, I'll get that stuff out there, Bob. It's good. Just hang on there. I'll stop the recording, but you just stay on for a minute, I guess.
All right.
And thank you everybody for tuning in. Go like, follow, share. I will
Thank
be
you.
back.
God bless.
God bless. All right, you guys have a good night. Like, follow, share.
Okay.